Hello friends, the last lecture for the fourth week is about Virginia Woolf's essay The Death of the Moth. We will see the objectives, her life and writings, then move on to the essay The Death of the Moth. We will pay attention to the theme, form, language and literary devices in this essay. Then we will discuss certain aspects of human relationships and reflections on life with reference to this essay. We will compare Frost's poem on design with Woolf's essay on the death of the moth. Further, again we will do a comparative study of Eliot's approach to the essay and that of Woolf. Finally, we will see the takeaways and summarize our presentation. Here are the objectives: to understand Virginia Woolf's life and her works, to analyze Woolf's essay The Death of the Moth, to realize the significance of life and death in the universe. Now we are focusing on the thematic aspect of this essay. To know that life and death are equally powerful, to live life fully to our potential. Then we will look into the thematic, formal, linguistic and literary analysis of Woolf's essay. We will also read Frost's sonnet Design on a spider and a moth and compare it with Woolf's essay on the death of the moth. Finally, we will compare the approaches of T.S. Eliot and Virginia Woolf to the essay, one to the impersonal essay, another to the personal essay, that is Eliot and Woolf. Let us see Virginia Woolf's life now. She was born in 1882 and she died in 1941. She was married to Leonard Woolf. She was a contributor to the Hogarth Press, which she established with her husband. She was also a member of the Bloomsbury Group, a popular group of the time of writers. She was a novelist, essayist, short story writer, diarist, dramatist, biographer and autobiographer. She was into several forms of writing, as a result of which she has left a great legacy for the feminist writers today. We have two quotations from her. The first is, "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction, short story or novel." This is considered to be one of the profound statements for feminist writers. Money and room for women to express their talents in writing. The second quotation is, "Books are the mirrors of the soul." So when we read books, they reflect on our own soul. This is one of the motives of doing this course, reading books and reflecting on our own self and soul. Here are some of the works of Virginia Woolf. She wrote several novels. Four of them are here: Mrs. Dalloway, To the Lighthouse, Orlando, The Waves. She has some non-fiction writings like A Room of One's Own and A Letter to the Young Poet, and finally we have short story collections. Two of them are here: The Haunted Wall and Kew Gardens. Let's learn a little about the context of this essay, The Death of the Moth. This essay was published posthumously in 1942 after Woolf's death in 1941. The titular essay of the book, The Death of the Moth and Other Essays, was published by Leonard Woolf, her husband. This essay is also often collected in anthologies like Didion's essay Why I Write. This essay deals with the theme of the inevitability of death. It is a good example of the personal essay that Woolf cherished and advocated throughout her life. She was not so much into impersonal formal essays. She wrote more of personal essays. This essay is considered to be one of the best of her essays. Now we have some sections, some passages from this essay. We have also some headings for us to understand various aspects of this essay. Woolf gives an introduction to the moth in the opening paragraph. We also have a picture of the moth. There may be several kinds of moths, but here we have one which is close to what Woolf describes. We have to understand this is basically a descriptive essay and also a reflective essay. Let's begin. Moths that fly by day are not properly to be called moths. They do not excite that pleasant sense of dark autumn nights and ivy blossom which the commonest yellow underwing asleep in the shadow of the curtain never fails to rouse in us. They are hybrid creatures neither gay like butterflies nor somber like their own species. Nevertheless, the present specimen, that is a moth, with his narrow hay-colored wings fringed with a tassel of the same color, a thread of the same color, seemed to be content with life. There was a moth, she noticed, and it was content with its life. Virginia Woolf describes the pleasant morning that she had one day. It was a pleasant morning, mid-September, mild, benignant, yet with a keener breath than that of the summer months. The plough was already scouring the field opposite the window, and where the share had been, the earth was pressed flat and gleamed with moisture. Such vigour came rolling in from the fields and the down beyond that it was difficult to keep the eye strictly turned upon the book. The rooks too were keeping one of their annual festivities, soaring round the tree tops until it looked as if a vast net with thousands of black knots in it had been cast up into the air, which after a few moments sank slowly down upon the trees until every twig seemed to have a knot at the end of it. Then suddenly the net would be thrown into the air again in a wider circle, this time with the utmost clamour and vociferation, as though to be thrown into the air and settle slowly down upon the tree tops were a tremendously exciting experience. We have a long sentence at the end. She describes the pleasant morning. Everything happened as usual. We have a ploughman, we have a set of rooks. She looks into the field and the valley. There is a common energy for all these activities that Woolf notices outside and also inside her house. The rooks, the ploughmen, the horses, the lean bare-backed downs, the moth dancing, fluttering, flying, the narrator, and all life forms. There are different kinds of life forms, but all of them share a common energy. What moves the moth moves everything else. That's how she connects. She connects herself with the moth and the environment with the moth. Now she looks into the nature of life. There is life, and which is manifest in different forms of activities around her house. Now what is that nature of life? She discusses in this paragraph. Yet because he was so small that he is the moth, she personifies the moth as a human being. Yet because he was so small and so simple a form of the energy that was rolling in at the open window and driving its way through so many narrow and intricate corridors in my own brain, not only the moth is moving around, the moth is also moving within her brain, and in those of other human beings there was something marvelous as well as pathetic about him. Marvelous and also pathetic about the moth. It was as if someone had taken a tiny bead of pure life and decking it as lightly as possible with down and feathers, soft feathers and feathers which are used to fly, had set it dancing and zigzagging to show us the true nature of life. Thus displayed, one could not get over the strangeness of it. One is apt to forget all about life, seeing it humped and bossed and garnished and cumbered so that it has to move with the greatest circumspection and dignity. Again, the thought of all that life might have been had he been born in any other shape caused one to view his simple activities with a kind of pity. There is life in this moth. It could have taken any other form, but it has taken the life of a moth, and that's why the author is moved to pity this moth which might die any time. The moth that she finds is near the window. So she describes the moth settling down on the window ledge, fluttering to the bottom of the window pane, then slipping down from the wooden ledge after the 7th attempt to raise himself. So she has noticed that the moth has made 7 attempts to raise himself. Then she notices that the moth had fallen to his back on the windowsill. Now there is a problem. The moth fell down and the moth could not wake up itself and fly again. That's why the moth's failure and awkwardness were the approach of death. That means the moth is going to die. Virginia Woolf considers death the enemy of the moth. She says how the death approaches this moth. The legs agitated themselves once more when the moth was not able to wake up. I looked as if for the enemy against which he struggled. I looked out of the doors. What had happened there? Presumably it was midday and work in the fields had stopped. Stillness and quiet had replaced the previous animation, that is vociferation and all that. The birds had taken themselves off to feed in the brooks. The horses stood still, yet the power was there all the same, massed outside, indifferent, impersonal, not attending to anything in particular. Somehow it was opposed to the little hay-colored moth. It was useless to try to do anything. Earlier in the morning everything was alive. Now in the midday everything is stand still. No movement at all. That means death has approached. Now Virginia Woolf has sympathies for both life and death. One's sympathies of course were well on the side of life, though she looks into life very seriously. Also, when there was nobody to care or to know, this gigantic effort on the part of an insignificant little moth against a power of such magnitude to retain what no one else valued or desired to keep moved one strangely. Again, somehow one saw life a pure being. I lifted the pencil again, useless though I knew it to be. She took a pencil to lift that moth up, but it was useless. But even as I did so, the unmistakable tokens of death showed themselves. The body relaxed, the body of the moth, the body relaxed and instantly grew stiff. The struggle was over. The insignificant little creature now knew death. Woolf thinks about life. She also understands death. That's why we have mentioned that she has sympathies for both life and death, though she feels more for life, the life of the moth. At the end of the essay, Woolf says, as I looked at the dead moth, this minute wayside triumph of so great a force over so mean an antagonist. Antagonist is this moth, death is the protagonist, that is hero and villain, filled me with wonder. Just as life had been strange a few minutes before, so death was now as strange. The moth, having righted himself, now lay most decently and uncomplaining composed. Once dead, there is no complaint, there is all composure, there is peace. Oh yes, he seemed to say, death is stronger than I am. Those of you who know about Virginia Woolf would know that she died by drowning herself. That means she committed suicide. Now you can see the kind of preoccupation that Virginia Woolf had with death. We have a contrast between life and death obviously throughout the essay. We also have the contrast between the moth and human being, animals on one hand, plants on one hand and human beings on another. We have the contrast between home from which the writer looks into the fields. There is also inertia and energy in this passage. We have animation on the one hand and stillness on the other hand. Animation refers to life, stillness refers to death. We also have fear and courage. We have the pleasant morning and also unpleasant morning. We find that life is significant and also insignificant at some point of time. We see the small moth and also the large cosmic force, that is death. When we analyze the form of the essay, we find that it is a personal narrative essay with a meditative slant. There is always some kind of reflection on what is life, what is death. We have the first person narrative with one, also she writes with I, but she also uses one. The aim of this essay is to describe the death of a day moth, not a night moth. She also makes the difference between day moth and night moth. The essay is developed with the introduction of the moth, its movements, comparison with the rooks, the ploughmen, the horses, and then how it dies finally. The focus is on the moth's dancing towards its own death. Some lessons we can have from this essay are, death is inevitable, no one can go against it. She also says, death is stronger than I am. This I can be anybody, living plant or animal or a living human being. Death is stronger than I am. Death is a supreme reality. That's what we will find in most of the great literary pieces. Now when we see the linguistic analysis, we can see that Woolf defines by negation. Here is a passage: moths that fly by day are not properly to be called moths. They do not excite that pleasant sense of dark autumn nights and ivy blossom which the commonest yellow underwing asleep in the shadow of the curtain never fails rosiness. They are hybrid creatures, neither gay like butterflies nor somber like their own species. Not properly, neither, nor, such negatives we find in this definition. We also have a passive voice usage: my eye was caught by him. That means the moth was so powerful that the zigzagging and dancing that attracted the eyes of the writer. We also have very brief and short sentences: what he could do he did, that is, he attempted to wake up. He was little or nothing but life. I looked out of doors, the horses stood still. Very short sentences. On the other hand, we have very long sentences as well in this essay. There are certain literary devices which are very interesting to notice in this essay. We have the example of the personification, that is, the whole moth is considered to be a human being. She uses he and him for the moth. The insignificant little creature now knew death, that is, the cognition process is attributed to the moth, that is, the moth knew death. We also have cases of metaphor in examples like the black knots and the net of the rooks. That word knot and net, these two are often used in a particular passage to tell us about the complicated nature of life. A tiny bead of pure life and decking it as lightly as possible with down and feathers, again with reference to the moth. The dancing of the moth itself is a kind of metaphor, imagining the moth as a dancer. We also have the concept of doom submerging an entire city. Next we have simile in his flight as one waits for a machine to start again. So something to do with comparison between the flight and a person waiting for a machine to start, that is, a machine to start and the moth to rise up. We have something like an epigrammatic statement in the last sentence here: death is stronger than I am. When we come to human relationships, we find that this is an essay on or about the death of the moth. What is there about human relationship? There is very little human presence. Plowmen are there outside the house, the writer is inside the house. We have a generalized statement about the fact of death for humans as well. The narrator and the plowman are two human presences we have. They are all subject to death. We have more of animal and natural presence in this essay, like the moth, the rooks, the horses and the downs. What we notice in this essay is a kind of interpretation of loneliness even in death. We also have something to do with the confusion of the narrative viewpoint, using I on the one hand and one on the other hand. So our relationship is also somewhat complicated. At times we approach with personal attitude, at other times we approach certain things with a kind of indifferent or impersonal attitude. Certain reflections on life are here about this essay. Woolf wrote this essay just before her death, just a year before her death. Nobody can fight against death successfully. She was fighting against death throughout her life. She tried to commit suicide, but finally she succeeded. However, we have to understand that the energy of life is very strong. The energy of death is also equally strong. Life and death always come into contact with each other, struggle with each other, and finally death succeeds. Maybe death appears again in another form of life. All that we can do is to explore and live our life to the full. As long as we have this life, let's live it full. The dancing movements of the moth are pointers to the impending stillness in death. The dance is actually a dance towards death. We have a beautiful poem called Design from Robert Frost. It is also one of the popular poems from Robert Frost. He wrote it on a spider and a moth. That is why it will be interesting to read it and compare it with the moth we have in Woolf's essay. I found a dimpled spider, fat and white, on a white heel all, holding up a moth like a white piece of rigid satin cloth. Assorted characters of death and plight, mixed ready to begin the morning ride, like the ingredients of a witch's broth, a snowdrop spider, a flower like a froth, and dead wings carried like a paper kite. What had that flower to do with being white, the wayside blue and innocent heel all? What brought the kindred spider to that height, then steered the white moth thither in the night? What but design of darkness to appall, if design governed in a thing so small? There is a moth, there is a spider, the spider has a web, and the moth falls into that spider's web, and all are dead. That is what we find in this poem. So, two living forms, one is a spider, another is a moth. The spider lives on the moth and both die at the end. Eliot had an impersonal approach to the essay, whereas Woolf had a personal approach to the essay. So, we have impersonal essay from T.S. Eliot. Look at all his writings, particularly essays, you will find that they are more impersonal, objective, whereas look at all the essays of Virginia Woolf, you will find that she has written more of personal essays. For T.S. Eliot, criticism was more like a science, whereas for Virginia Woolf, criticism was more like literature. In T.S. Eliot, we have analysis, judgment, objectivity. On the other hand, we have synthesis, appreciation and subjectivity in Woolf's essays. While T.S. Eliot is patriarchal, Woolf is matriarchal. We have systematic and rigid approach to writing in T.S. Eliot. On the other hand, we have a fluid and flexible approach to writing in Woolf. Eliot deals more with facts than Woolf, who deals with feelings and impressions. We also have a whole total view of life in T.S. Eliot. On the other hand, we have a fragmented view of life in Woolf. That fleeting moment of life is naturally fragmented. T.S. Eliot aims to give knowledge to the reader through his essay, whereas Woolf tries to give pleasure to the reader through her essay. So, there are two different approaches to essay writing, and we have compared Eliot and Woolf to bring out these two differences. What are the takeaways for us from this discussion of Virginia Woolf's essay, The Death of the Moth? Essay writing is the art of the soul. That is what we can see from The Death of the Moth. We can also compare it with Amish Tripathi, who has said it is all about soul preparing oneself for writing. We also understand that experience is more important than knowledge. We have to face death energetically and enthusiastically, just like the moth dancing towards its death. We can also understand that accepting death, the inevitability of death, is useful to us. We will not feel bad about ourselves or about life. We have to realize that nothing is stronger than death. We may not be able to understand the design of life, but we can live it to the full. What is the design of life? Ultimately, it is the design of death. We may not understand it fully, but we can live our life fully, well, energetically, dancing towards our end. We can also write about our experiences if we observe our life with attention, as Virginia Woolf does or Joan Didion does. Observation, critical observation, creative observation, attentive observation is important for us. To summarize our discussion of Woolf's essay, The Death of the Moth, we have seen the objectives, we looked into the life and writings of Virginia Woolf, we saw the context in which Death of the Moth was written, we paid attention to the theme, form, language and literary devices in this essay. We also paid attention to the human relationships and reflections on life that we can have from this essay. We compared Frost's poem on design with Woolf's essay, The Death of the Moth. We also looked into the differences between the impersonal essay and the personal essay by comparing T.S. Eliot and Virginia Woolf's attitude to essay writing. Finally, we have looked into the takeaways. One of the most important takeaways from this is live life to the full and enjoy your life. We have some references for you. Please look into these references and help yourself.